Good morning, everyone. If council can take their seat, we can start momentarily. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our meeting Thursday, March 5th, 2020. We have a statement to read here. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendment listed as item 1, 2, and 4 on today's agenda. For the items mentioned, only those who make oral submission today or written submission before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal if council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of receipt of the application for zoning and 120 days for an official plan amendment. A comment sheet is available at the door for anyone wishing to submit written comment on these amendments. Declaration of interest? See none. Confirmation of minute 11, meeting for February 6, 2020 of the Agricultural Rural Affairs Committee, and minute 12, special meeting of February 11, 2020 of the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee. On both minutes, okay, thank you. We go through our consent agenda and Planning and Infrastructure Economic Development Plan Service, item number 1, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 6139 and 6143 Perth Street. So we have two speakers. So we'll hold item number 1. Item number 2, zoning bylaw amendment, part of 1810 York's Corner Road. Item number 1, the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend council approve an amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for part of 1810 York's Corner Road for the purpose of rezoning the land from agriculture subzone 2 AG2 to agriculture subzone 6 AG2 to prohibit residential uses on the retaining farmland as detailed in document 2. Item number 2, that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee approve the consultation detail section of this report to be included as a part of the brief. On this item? Okay, thank you. Item number 3, which is Rural Economic Development Strategy and Plan. So we have a presentation from our staff, and I believe we have a speaker on this item as well. So we'll hold item 3. Item number 4, official plan amendment, Portobello Boulevard. And the item is that the Agricultural Affairs Committee recommend that council adopt the draft official plan amendment attached as a document 2 that changes delegation of city-owned land fronting Portobello and Brian Coburn Boulevard and several private residential lots fronting Trim and 10th Line Road in Orleans from an agricultural resource area designation to a general rural area designation. And we do, as the clerk, receive a petition on this item, but on this item in front of us is we have no speaker, I believe. No one registered to speak on item number 4. On item number 4, okay, thank you. So we do have information previously distributed. It's the 2019 Grand Rural Association Partnership Program and Rural Community Building Grant Program is received. Okay, so we do have two items. We like to deal with it earlier or first before we go to our agenda, and those both motions need waiver of the rules. So we start with item number 1. Or motion number 1. I'll just, I know Councillor Moffat will be moving this motion, but just to put it in, maybe we'll turn it to you. Go ahead. Waive it can we waive the rule on this? Or do you have a copy? Okay, so the rule's been waived, and this is about Bill 156, Security from Trespassing and Protecting Food Safety Act 2020. And Councilor Moffitt.
Thank you very much. I'll read the entire motion because it lays out exactly what we're doing here. So it's support for Bill 156, whereas the City of Ottawa has a large agricultural area and continues to play an important role in Ontario's agri-food sector, $165 million in farm cash receipts, and whereas the agri-food sector is the second largest industry in Ontario, contributing nearly $40 billion annually to Ontario's GDP, and is essential for providing food and fuel at home and across the globe, and whereas Ontario farms have increasingly come under threat of unwanted trespassers and activists who are illegally entering property, barns, buildings, seizing private property, and threatening the health and safety of the farm employees, livestock, and crops. And whereas in December 2019, the Government of Ontario introduced new legislation in Bill 156, Security from Trespass and Protecting Food Safety Act 2020, which will ensure farm businesses have a legal standing to protect their farm, family, and employees, livestock, crops, and ultimately the entire food supply. And whereas the city supports the effort being made by the Ontario government to protect those working in the agri-food sector, therefore be it resolved that the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee recommends Council strongly supports Bill 156, Security from Trespass and Protecting Food Safety Act, and that a copy of this motion be forwarded to the Honourable Ernie Hardeman, Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, and to Rural Ontario Municipal Association, Roma.
Thank you. And those folks, this motion, believe it or not, the minister has asked us when we were in Roma to gather some support for this bill. I want to thank my colleague, Scott Moffitt, for moving this motion. And we need to send a copy, or I think the staff will be sending a copy to Roma as I sit on Roma board, and this is very important to the rural municipality. So on the motion? Okay, thank you. Wow, good to have, thank you. Our second, because we don't usually get applaud here, so I was surprised. So I was happy to receive it. So the other motion also we need to waive a rule to receive is about 6900 Bleaks Road, road extension construction. So on a waiver of the rule? Okay, so we'll turn it back to Councilor Moffitt, who has a motion about this. Councilor Moffitt.
Thank you very much. So this is in relation to a new lot that was created in the last couple of years on Bleaks Road. Just some challenges with building permits and unmaintained road issue, so that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee approved. Oh, yeah, you already did that part. Whereas a rural residential lot has been created at 6900 Bleaks Road through a consent to sever, and whereas the new property fronts on an unmaintained section of City Road, and whereas the owner wishes to obtain a building permit in respect to the residential lot, therefore be it resolved the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee refer to Council the matters of Bleaks Road and the property at 6900 Bleaks Road, and direct Planning, Infrastructure, and Economic Development Department staff to work with the owner to explore options available to address the issue of frontage upon an improved road in order to be able to present a recommended approach to the March 25th, 2020 council meeting. So this is a situation where a permit was ready, and there was a misunderstanding on the city's part as to the conditions of the severance and the fact that it didn't front onto a maintained section of road. So that's left the property owner in an unfortunate situation of not being able to get the permit, even though he's gone through the entire process. So this is just giving staff the authority to be able to look at options with the owner and see what we can come up with as a solution to this unfortunate set of circumstances prior to the meeting of council, so that if anything needs to come forward to council and I need to do anything at council, this gives me the authority to be able to have that in front of me and go in that direction.
And before we go to question, and legal okay with this motion, am I correct? You prepared this motion for us?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so any question from my colleague on the motion? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Councilor Moffitt. So now we go to our consent agenda, and and item number 1. So we do have two speakers on item number 1. Oh, okay, we have Mr. Walter Newton speak about it. Oh, we do presentation, sorry, just give me a few minutes. So I think we're ahead of ourselves there, so we'll have staff on this item, so.
For my mom and dad listening at home, we're just having some technical difficulties.
Good morning. I'm Cheryl McWilliams, the file lead on this particular application. This is an application to consider an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment at 6139, 6143 Perth Street. I'll go through this fairly quickly because I think the committee is fairly familiar with it, and I believe the speakers here today are also familiar with it. The site is in the village of Richmond. It's north of Perth Street and east of Huntley. So basically, the official plan amendment is to allow an existing approved development and partially built development to proceed with creation of individual lots for the various phases of the development. Just flip through this. The Richmond secondary plan identifies the north part of the property as residential apartments and the south part as residential ground-oriented. The zoning in place is a combination of village sort of higher density zones and a village mixed use zone on the front. Come on, where'd it go? This is the version, the 2010 version of the approved site plan for the property. The properties on the pointer doesn't work on this, good. The properties on the right side of the screen, or the buildings on the right side of the screen, are life lease bungalows. This is all one property at this time. The property, the part in the middle is a recently completed 3-story apartment building, and the back part of that particular parcel, or part of the property, is a unbuilt retirement residence. The back part of the property is right now approved with 2 low-rise apartment buildings, and that work has not started yet. Where is it? Yeah. Okay, why is it going? There we go. This is just the image, the elevation of the one completed apartment building and the other proposed retirement residence. This is some street view images and the aerial photos of some of the existing buildings within the community. The community is known right now as Samara. It was originally known as Hyde Park. With the Phase 1, the Life Lease bungalows were called and are still known as the Groves. The entire community is served by, by a private communal water system and connects to the city sanitary system. It is all serviced with one storm system and is all designed in terms of parking and access internally. The applicants are looking for the ability to create separate buildings on the property. I'll just go back to on the property so that they can look towards finishing the development. Financing, as I understand it, is easier when there are separate parcels to get mortgages and loans, et cetera, for. Because it is a private communal system, the city has a municipal responsibility agreement with the owners where we don't hold, a trustee holds an amount in trust for the capital replacement costs of the water system, and also it covers operating costs. The Ministry of the Environment, in their approvals, requires that the city be ultimately responsible for the operation and maintenance. We don't want to be in on that on a daily basis, so they being the owner, has their own operator for the system and they're responsible. If they fail, the ministry can order the city to go in. So we have access to the funds available. The way that the ministry requires this system to be set up is to be with one owner on one property. So splitting up the property is very problematic when you have a system that has to be on one lot. In order to achieve that, the applicant is proposing to go ahead with a common elements condominium where the water system, the sanitary system, the roads, the fire suppression system, which is a private system, the storm access roads, the private roads, the walkways, and some of the other common features will form part of the common elements condominium, and the balance of the land, mainly the specific buildings and the different phases of the development, would form parcels of land that are tied to that condominium in perpetuity. And there is the rights and obligations associated with a normal condominium that would run with those properties. Those individual property owners would then be able to sit on the board, the common elements condominium board. That's one about the condominium. Common elements condominium is one of the only processes that is likely available for proceeding forward with being able to split up this particular property, given the underlying water system issue and our responsibilities relating to that. So right now, the official plan allows for this particular site that residential uses, normally residential uses aren't permitted on a private communal system. The official plan only allows for institutional uses, really. So we amended the official plan in 2018 to allow for the residential uses based on the approved site plan from 2010, which essentially was permitting residential uses. The site was originally planned to be a retire-in-place community, with many of the units actually being not in institutional use, but residential uses. So we reflected that. We also indicated at the time the applicants had applied to also be able to split up the property. And as we've worked through that, we've come to a conclusion, and the conclusion is that the common elements may be the only appropriate way to move forward. And in order to do that, the official plan needs to be amended to allow for multiple units to be allowed to be created under these with the water system, still recognizing that the water system itself has to be on one property. So the official plan amendment is intended to go forward to allow for that to happen. The related zoning bylaw would also recognize that these parcels could be carved up at some point in the future. Both the official plan and the zoning bylaw don't specifically direct this to happen, but it's to allow for it to happen. We also have a common elements condominium application that we've held a public meeting for last month, and once the official plan and zoning bylaw is in place, we then can consider draft approval for the common elements condominium. There's still a number of issues that we're working through to make sure that the city's interests are covered off, and that by potentially supporting the draft plan of condominium, we're not impacting any other legal agreements that may exist, for example, the life lease agreements. So we're still working through that process, and we won't be contemplating that again until we're through the official plan and the zoning process. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williams. So now we can go to, and then we can take question to staff after the two speakers. So speaker number one is Walter Nuttall. Sorry, Walter, we asked you earlier, but my apologies. We should have waited for the, come on in, sir. And you have 5 minutes to address the committee, sir. There's a button you need to press on the front of you. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm one of the life lease owners of one of the units that are on the south end of, on the north end of the property. I speak not so much in opposition to the plan because we welcome it, but in terms of timing, we asked the committee to postpone the discussion. Under our life leases, when the development of life lease properties is finished, the owner is to transfer the property to a corporation of life lease owners. We've been looking forward to this for some time, and the zoning does create the severance that we need in order to take over the property as life lease owners. However, the property owner has indicated that he's in no hurry to make that transfer. He has indicated that the life lease owners may have to pay $270,000 into the trust funds for the Common Elements Condominium Corporation, which comes to $3,000 roughly per unit, which would be a great difficulty for many of the life lease owners to come up with that money this summer. And the life lease owners at this point would have to, for the foreseeable future, would have to pay about 70% of the operating costs, but have no say at all in the operation of the condominium corporation. The owner has been quite opaque about meeting with life lease owners. However, he has asked for a meeting at the end of this month with the Life Lease Owners Committee to discuss these issues. And therefore, I would ask for a postponement for a month or two of a decision on this, in part to put a bit of pressure on behalf of the 150 people or so who live in these units with the owner who has been less than forthcoming in the last 3-4 years that we've been discussing this with him. the owners, the life lease owners, are the ones who are most affected in the short term by these changes. The current owner has indicated that a lot of the costs related to the zoning changes will be transferred to the Common Elements Condominium Corporation. We as life lease owners feel that most of the changes that are being done are to enable Samara Development to develop the rest of the property and earn a good return on their investment. And that cost should not be transferred to the Common Elements Condominium Corporation and the owners of the life lease, of the life lease units. But we haven't, because of the short time frame, we haven't had opportunity to discuss this, and therefore we're asking for a postponement of a month or two, so that we can get greater clarity as to what the responsibility and the cost to the life lease owners are of these implications.
Thank you very much. We have a question for the delegate. Just, okay.
So speaking after you will be representative of Silver Maple Developments. I'll get them to respond to some of the comments you made.
Okay.
Also, that meeting, we had the public meeting there a couple weeks ago where Silver Maple Developments was there, myself, city staff, and we committed to that meeting with Silver Maple. And I know that in the past, those meetings have been simply between the owner and the life lease holders. So I'm going to participate in that meeting to try to help facilitate that discussion, to make sure that the questions are being answered that you're looking for, and that we are getting somewhere on this. I don't think it's anyone's intent to put further burden on the 92 life leaseholders. So, you know, we want to move forward in a direction that protects yourself and your neighbors, but also allows the rest of the site to be developed and finished, because for the people in this room that might not know, it's 2 unfinished buildings that have been sitting there.
Yeah, I think all of us want to see this finished as soon as possible. However, the situation is complicated by the fact that last summer, the owner indicated that he would not deal with the committee on settling it, the committee which has the support of the vast majority of life lease owners, but that he wants to negotiate with each of the 92 life lease owners individually, which we as a community feel is a totally irrational approach.
Right, so I mean, hopefully my involvement will be able to resolve those issues and get both sides to work together collaboratively, so that we don't have these issues and these misunderstandings, and also just the sentiment, the negative sentiment from yourself and your neighbors towards Silver Maple Developments, because that's not productive, and we need to be able to figure out how we can get through that.
But let's keep in mind what's on the front of us today is the amendment to the official plan. So we have to be, this is what's on the front of us today. Thank you, Mr. New. Any question, any other comment? No, thank you. Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Bill Holzman. Mr. Holzman. Mr. Holzman, you have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Good, okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Bill Holzman. We're the planning consultants for the proponent, which is, it's called Samara Square. It's Silver Maples Developments, and I have with me Aaron, Aaron Kyle, who's a representative of that and can possibly address some of the other issues that the previous speaker and maybe committee members have. So first of all, as the chair pointed out, staff pointed out, this is an application for to allow for the creation of individual blocks of land. It's not creating those blocks. That's another implementing tool, a condominium application. We've applied for it, of course. Going back to the purpose of the applications and perhaps the intent of why the policy's in your official plan to begin with, it was so that the city would be able to enable them to deal with one owner of communal systems, because they didn't want to get number of homeowners or landowners affected by it. So nothing would change with this as well, because the intention here is when the land is subdivided, all of those common elements, particularly the communal water, is still going to be owned by one entity. That's Silver Maples, so nothing changes there. But as the previous speaker, or as staff pointed out, the property is one, and so there is obviously a historical nature of it. There's infrastructure in the ground, there's 92 life lease, there's a building that fortunately, because of the actions of this committee and council 2 years ago, was able to be fully converted to an apartment building. It's fully leased, and there's demand for more. So that was, my client's very appreciative of that action you took a year or two ago. But because it's all on one property, it is extremely difficult, in fact, almost impossible, and Aaron can get into that, how you finance further construction when you have it on one property. And in fact, that burden would be passed on to the 92 life lease as part of that construction financing. So what this policy allows, and the zoning would allow, is possibly the creation of different blocks of land, but all tied together to that common system, the communal systems. So we believe it's a win-win. In terms of, and really, I'm going to be very brief because it's been pointed out already. I guess in terms of any kind of delay, we need to move forward. It has dragged on since 2010 because of a number of situations. Buildings started to be built, they're left unfinished, and really through the actions of my client over the last couple of years, he's been able to start to move it forward and made progress. But the approval of the OPA and zoning would enable him to move that next step. And I can assure you, and your legal staff will assure you, that through the subdivision of the land through the condominium, that these people will be protected forever in perpetuity. They will have the same rights and obligations. So I'll turn it over to Aaron, who can possibly address some of the questions that maybe a committee member has on some of the financial implications of what this could possibly lead to, but I can't speak to that.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Holzman, and I would like to restrict our question to what's on the front of us today. So what's on the front of us today is approval of proposed modification to the official plan amendment and the zoning. So any question? Councilor Moffett, you said you have some question too. You want to say something? We still have a couple of minutes left.
Do you want to speak, Aaron?
You want to speak too?
I think I just want to reiterate what Bill said, that for us, this OPA amendment allows us to move the development forward. At the moment, with 92 life leases tied to the single parcel of land, no major financial institution is interested in providing any kind of funding, just because they see those 92 life lease interests as being a risk to them. So being able to sever the property into smaller parcels will allow us to put the appropriate funding in place for each phase of the project and be able to move it forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Moffett.
Thanks. So just if you bear with me, because it is not directly pertaining to this, but it is pertaining to a comment that the previous speaker made, was just about this leads to the ability to set up the Common Elements Corporation, condo corporation, which is concurrently happening right now. The comment about the board, the makeup of the board, and the notion that the 92 life lease holders won't have status on the board. Can you just comment on that?
Yeah, so when the condominium will be registered, if it is registered, at that time, we would still own all the parcels of land. So the 92 life lease holders, at the moment that the condo would be registered, would not have representation on that board because we are the sole owners of all the parcels of land. But what it does allow for is, in the future, what the previous speaker was talking about, conveyance of land to the 92 life lease holders is possible. Now, that is a process that we look to, cross and discuss with them at the appropriate time. But at the moment, it's not possible to do that because we aren't able to sever the land. So when the condo is registered, we would be representing all parcels and therefore hold all representation on the condo board. but it allows for the future, for the 92 life leaseholders to be able to be represented on that condo if and when they are transferred their land.
So it's a valid concern. It's a valid concern that they wouldn't have representation. Is there any scenario in which the corporation creation allows for you to make exceptions and allow these individuals to have representation on this board?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, we can speak to our legal representative, but basically, the way the community is set up now, it won't change. We have overall say over the entire water infrastructure, how it stands today. That won't change when the condo is registered, but it allows it to change. These 92 life leaseholders own the right to lease or live in their units in perpetuity, but as the owner of the property, we own all the parcels of tied land. Going forward, as we've always said to their community, we are committed to having discussions. They've always told us that their hope is to one day own the property that their life leases are on, and we're committed to doing that, but that is going to be further discussions down the road. And at that time, they would be able to have representation on a condo board, as well as if anything was ever sold in the future, that whoever would be purchasing that parcel of land would have representation on that condo board.
Will the condo board have sole authority to raise the condo fees?
Yes, the condo board would be able to raise the condo fees. As it stands now, their life lease, that's essentially already in the life lease that the agreements that they have with us now. The budgeting and occupancy fees are at our discretion.
Totally off topic.
Yeah, no, I know it's off topic. Thanks.
Any other question to the presenter? Okay, both of you, Aaron and Mr. Holzman, thank you very much, folks. So what's on the front of us, again, I would like to read it. That item number 1, that Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend Council, A, approve the proposed modification to the official plan for 6139 and 6143 Percy Street to permit future parcel or lot creation serviced by the existing private communal water system that owned and operated by one owner as detailed in document 2. B, approve the proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw for 6139 and 6143 Percy Street to rezone from the Village Mixed Use Subzone 4, VM4, to the Village Mixed Use Subzone 4 Rural Exception, VM4, and amend the exception zone for Village Residential, Third Density Subzone 3 Rural Exception, 858 VE, V3E, 858R, and Village Residential Third Density Subzone 3 Rural Exception, 859 with a holding provision, V3E, 859, to permit the planned unit development and that all sites consider one lot for zoning purpose as detailed in document 3 and shown in document 4. And item 2, that the Agricultural Rural Affairs Committee approve the consultation detailed section of this report be included as a part of the Again, folks, I know, I just want to, so to the folks who's listening to us, this is what's on the front of us, and I know we were a little bit flexible with the presenter to talk about the condo and the condo fee, and Councilor Moffett took it on himself also to clarify some of those areas, but what's on the front of us is not about the condo fee, it's about the amendment to the official plan and the zoning. So, but Councilor Moffett, do you have a comment to make?
Yeah, just before we vote on this, just to say that, the last 2 years on this and the other application that came before us, which was a part of this same OPA, it's been trying to address a historically bad scenario. Somehow this plan got approved in 2005. It was a community with 92 individual units where they own the unit, but they don't own the land. And then 5 more buildings north of that with one access point on private road system, on one communal well system. It's not a great plan. I don't, financially, I don't think the plan was even viable, which is why it went bankrupt in the end. The current owner has acquired the property from receivership and is trying to work through it. But in the meantime, the community is held hostage by a 5-story, unfinished concrete, mass that sits in the middle of town, the tallest structure in town, an unfinished hideousness that's been sitting there for 10 years. So it's challenging because there's a lot to this, but we need to move forward on this. We need to get this. We're fortunate. There was a 3-story unfinished building. It's now finished. It's now fully occupied. It's an over 55 rental facility in town, which is needed. The next 2 buildings are retirement residences, which is needed in the village of Richmond. So we need these buildings finished, but there's other concerns that need to be addressed at the same time, and I'm committed to doing that. And hopefully Silver Maple Development is committed to working with me on that to help the existing residents that live there. I think we need to move on with this today, but there's clearly a lot more work to do on behalf of the residents that live there so that we can try to address those concerns as well.
Okay, thank you, Council Muffin. We heard you earlier committed to continue working with the residents well, so kudos to you. So on the item, Council, go ahead, please.
I guess part comment, part question. My sense in reading from this report is, I don't know whether it came from the applicant or staff, but some creativity around solving some of the problems that Councillor Moffat's alluded to, and maybe some flexibility from staff as well as, being open to, focus on finding a solution to a problem. I guess my question was, it is complex and complicated, just around the municipal responsibility as it has to do with the well. Is there precedence for that in the City of Ottawa or within Ontario? I'm just trying to make sure we understand as a committee. I think you've mitigated the risk, but is this based on, a previous similar situation where this kind of an ownership structure, this kind of approach has been used to mitigate the risk of the city's responsibility as it has to do with the private well?
So the municipal responsibility agreement is, I guess, not common in Ottawa, but it has occurred in a number of other situations where we have sort of a multiple unit scenario. For example, most of the mobile home parks we have municipal responsibility agreements with, or are attempting to get municipal responsibility agreements with. There's some retirement homes. I can't remember the name. It used to be called Orchard View on Manotick Station Road. We have a municipal responsibility agreement with them. So this is a fairly common thing in terms of the types of uses and scenarios we're dealing with. The difficulty with this one is the size of the development, the nature of the development, and being able to split it up to allow it to proceed to completion. So the municipal responsibility agreement's already in place, and the condominium hopefully will find a way of meshing that in with the existing agreement.
Okay, so that's helpful. In terms of the securities that are being held by the trustee, maybe this is something legal could speak to. How often does it happen that a municipality would have to go down that route? How often, is it typical that there are problems with these kinds of agreements?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Do you want to comment first and then I'll finish up?
Yeah, I'll maybe start by commenting I've been involved in the majority of the municipal responsibility agreements in some way or another in the city. We've not had to go in and actually follow up on them in terms of calling in the monies. Okay. So we've been involved in them, some of them well over 20 years, and have had no issues. Ministry has issued a few orders against some of the septic or well systems, but the owners have gone in and made those repairs and replacements as needed.
Okay.
Just to follow up, Mr. Chair, as Ms. McWilliams said, we have not had to pull those securities, but the way that the municipal responsibility agreements are drafted, If the city had to go in, each of these systems, although private, have to meet a certain municipal standard, so that if we were ordered to take them over, we do have the ability to go in and operate them appropriately, and any replacements and upgrades that are done at the city's request, so that it meets our municipal infrastructure if we did have to come in.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just to be noted, Councilor DeRose, Moffat, and I, we met even last year with the Minister Municipal Affairs to see if there's a possibility the province be responsible for the communal system. And that's one way we can have the affordable housing in a rural area, not just in Ottawa and rural Ontario, and have the province be responsible for those agreements. But back to our item. On the item, okay. Thank you very much, folks. And now we go to item number 3, the Rural Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan. And we do have a presentation from our staff.
Good morning, Chair and members of committee. I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to present on the city's Rural Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan. To my left is Shayla Doherty, Program Manager in Economic Development. Also here to present is Lauren Miller from MDB Insight, who we engaged in the development of the strategy, as well as I'd also like to recognize Ian Scott in the audience, Economic Development Officer, and our Rural Affairs Unit represented by Ryan Thompson today that contributed to this project. As part of today's presentation, Jeff Day and increasingly compete for investment, talent, and quality of life. It's important that economic development efforts are focused and that the tools and supports are in place to enable this growth. To achieve this, the city's approach to economic development is centered upon 4 areas of focus, which include knowledge-based industries, urban services and main streets, tourism and creative industries, and of course, the rural economy. Just a reminder, later this year, we will be coming forward to FEDCO with an updated economic development strategy that will include a geographic lens or overlay, in addition to the areas of the focus I just mentioned. So this update will highlight economic development opportunities in different areas of the city, with today's rural strategy providing the approach for rural Ottawa. Lastly, before I pass the presentation over to Jeff Day and Lauren, I'd like to highlight that our economic development staff have been and continue to work closely and extensively with planning staff to align this strategy with the new official plan process, including the recently approved preliminary policy directions. Turn it over to Jeff Day.
Thank you, Don. The strategy was developed following a 3-phase process that look at where we are now, where do we want to go, and how do we get there. The first phase was an analysis of the local and broader regional and provincial economy. This resulted in research that assessed the economic performance of rural Ottawa against a range of socioeconomic criteria combined with business and industry data. Consideration was also given to reports, studies, and strategies that would have an impact on economic development in rural Ottawa. This was combined with an inventory of community assets such as education, arts and culture, recreation, and the natural environment. The results of this research were then used to inform stakeholder discussions and to conduct a SOAR, strengths, opportunities, aspirations, results, and risk assessment. Through stakeholder engagement efforts, the second phase of the strategy sought to answer the question, where do we want to go? Given the importance of seeking input and developing an informed strategy, an extensive consultation process was undertaken. Stakeholder engagement efforts included one-on-one interviews and small group discussions with key community stakeholders, business leaders, economic development partners, elected officials, and senior management. 4 community workshops were hosted in June 2019, one of each of the rural wards, and also we did an electronic community survey. We also had a random sample telephone-based survey with rural businesses. Lastly, a rural day workshop with planning and economic development staff to discuss strategic priorities for rural economic development and implications on the forthcoming official plan review. In all, input was obtained from more than 285 businesses, community leaders, and staff across the city. The final and third phase of the development look at how do we get there, and consisted of the development and validation of strategic priorities and an action plan, which will be presented by Lauren.
Thank you, Jeff Day. On behalf of MDB Insight, I'm very pleased to be here today. I'm very proud of the work that's been done by our team and in conjunction with the staff from the City of Ottawa. The slide in front of you provides a snapshot summary of the rural economy for the City of Ottawa. As you know, rural Ottawa comprises approximately 10% of the city's population and makes up about 80% of the city's land area, one of the largest rural areas of any municipality in the country. This makes Ottawa unique, particularly in terms of the rural area's interconnectedness to the urban core and the ability to access the products, services, and consumer market that the large city offers. I won't go through each number on the slide, but I do want to highlight a number of factors. Firstly, the rural economy makes a significant contribution to Ottawa's economy with approximately $1 billion in GDP. The primary sectors are construction, agriculture, agribusiness, and tourism. And in addition, rural Ottawa also provides significant locations for manufacturing, for warehousing, as well as retail and more. There are approximately 1,000 businesses across the rural area and a further 1,000 farms in the community as well. Most businesses are small businesses employing between 1 and 9 people, and most farms are considered to be mid-sized. Approximately 60% of all the farms in Ottawa are involved in crop production, largely corn and soybean, while the other 40% are geared towards animal farming and production. The rural population base has grown about 8% over recent years, and while this might not be as significant as what the city has experienced overall, it is nonetheless particularly competitive and higher than what we see in the balance of rural Eastern Ontario. Approximately 10% of the city's immigrant population is rural. And again, while the rural area has less immigration than the city as a whole, the proportion of immigrants is notably higher than what we see in the balance of rural Eastern Ontario. For us, this highlights Ottawa's rural lifestyle and other factors like access to employment opportunities, both rural and urban, and the strong appeal that this has to new residents. Rural Ottawa accounts for about 10% of the city's labor force, with a participation rate of 70%, which is high. And the workforce is also seen as particularly diverse, given the various sectors of the broader economy, and like Ottawa as a whole, residents are well educated. Lastly, median household incomes are higher than that of the city, suggesting there is a significant local purchasing power and ability to advance rural economic growth through increased commercial and retail offerings. I'll walk you through now some of the additional key findings, which for the purposes of the presentation are divided into 2 parts, strengths and opportunities. As you've just seen, overall, rural Ottawa's strengths point to a strong economic foundation. During the last slide, I touched a lot on the significant economic contribution of rural Ottawa, the rural workforce, as well as the strong appeal of the rural lifestyle. But I'd like to add that the area's natural assets, in addition to both arts and cultural assets, raises the quality of life for rural residents and the quality of experience for residents and visitors to the city. Equally important, local pride and a high level of volunteerism in the community also contributes to a strong lifestyle appeal. Specific to industries, rural Ottawa has demonstrated strengths in agriculture, agritourism, as well as professional, scientific, and emerging creative industries. Stakeholders that we engage through the process point to an emerging rural innovation ecosystem, particularly in the agricultural sector. Ottawa's strong educational institutions and nationally designated research land can ensure access to incubation and commercialization opportunities targeted to local industry needs. Lastly, proximity to urban services and the ability to leverage those services, educational institutions, and a strong knowledge-based business sector are all positive factors that contribute to long-term sustainability. Ottawa's international airport and network of 400 series highways increases rural access to regional and international markets and is an important factor for business attraction and investment in the area. Despite a high level of satisfaction with rural Ottawa as a place to own and operate a business, as with anything, there is opportunity for improvement. Throughout the strategy's various engagement efforts, it became clear there's a limited knowledge of business support programming. Many businesses surveyed lacked awareness of programs available to them, highlighting the opportunity to increase both awareness and the uptake of existing and future economic development programming. On investment readiness, the rural areas account for approximately 50% of the city's vacant industrial and employment areas in the form of business parks. These lands serve industries like warehousing, construction and storage, and certain types of manufacturing do not require servicing. While plentiful in terms of the amount of land, rural Ottawa may be at a disadvantage, in our opinion, in attracting future investment compared to surrounding areas that have municipally owned and serviced industrial lands and business parks. Specific to broadband, we know that Ottawa's rural areas lack access to effective and reliable broadband, which can in turn limit business investment and innovation reliant on connectivity. And while this is true of much of rural Canada, and as a result, the federal government has made access to broadband for all a goal for 2030. Turning to housing, rural Ottawa is largely characterized by single-family detached homes, and while some higher density options exist, they are available only in a few of the larger villages. Limited housing options make it difficult to attract and sustain a diverse population and workforce. And for example, new Canadians and young workers may experience challenges living in the rural communities given the lack of housing variety and rental options. Any efforts to increase the variety of housing options should take into consideration current limits with servicing. The lack of servicing in most of the rural villages means this may continue to be a constraint. Lastly, there is great opportunity to develop flexible planning policies to support small-scale and innovative agricultural operations. I'll explain a little bit more of this in an upcoming slide. Building on the strengths and the opportunities discussed, the strategy provides a framework and a roadmap to guide rural economic development efforts. It's also intended to position Ottawa as a national leader in rural economic development, in particular, a leader in the urban-suburban-rural dynamic. As I walk you through the strategy and the action plan highlights in the next few slides, you will note that the strategy is comprehensive, extends well beyond a traditional agricultural approach, and certainly looks to integrate the efforts of economic development within the broader administration of the city. More specifically, the strategy focuses on 5 strategic priorities. This includes a supportive business environment, a vibrant rural lifestyle, a strengthened rural tourism position, innovation in agriculture and agri-food production, and advocating for rural priorities. Each priority is accompanied by associated actions to be delivered over the immediate, short, and long term. The action plan, while ambitious, is intended to be delivered collaboratively by the city and partners like Ottawa Tourism. Earlier, I spoke about the limited knowledge on programming for rural businesses. The purpose of this first priority is to create a supportive business environment to ensure continued economic growth and sustainability. A supportive business environment enhances the creation and growth of small and medium businesses and supports entrepreneurship. To do this, some of the highlighted immediate actions proposed include enhancing the RAPP grant program to increase economic development outcomes, developing a rural business toolkit that includes information on programming, grants, and economic data, and providing information sessions to promote the toolkit and increase program awareness. As well, it proposes identifying opportunities for business investment and developing marketing materials to encourage investment. The second priority, a vibrant rural lifestyle, was identified to leverage and communicate rural Ottawa's strengths and opportunities, as well as to address challenges around housing diversity, broadband, talent, etc. Specifically, staff in the Innovative Client Services Department and conducting a study of Ottawa's connectivity landscape and are looking at ways to address inequalities of broadband and reliability. The strategy also looks at ways of increasing awareness of the rural lifestyle and economic opportunities by engaging in storytelling through social media and other means by profiling successful rural businesses and entrepreneurs and by facilitating familiarization tours with immigrant settlement agencies. The third priority is a strengthened rural tourism position. Rural Ottawa provides distinctive tourism experiences for those visiting the city as well as for its residents. While downtown sites and experiences are well known to travelers, there is an opportunity to further highlight what rural Ottawa offers, including museums, wineries, breweries, natural landscape, cycling, and many more. To do this, the strategy proposes working with villages to define and market their tourism offerings, to explore opportunities to showcase rural tourism experiences, and to present Ottawa's place DNA to rural stakeholders. Ottawa's Place DNA, as I'm sure you're aware, is a partnership between the city and Ottawa Tourism that defines Ottawa's Place brand and provides tools to businesses and stakeholders on how best to use and promote the brand. Lastly, another action I would like to highlight is to engage with tourism providers and entrepreneurs as Ottawa's Tourism Destination Development Fund, which encourages the creation of new attractions, events, festivals, and experiences. Innovation in agriculture and agri-food production is the fourth strategic priority. It emerged as a key consideration during the engagement phase of the strategy. Innovation in agriculture allows farmers to deploy technology to stay competitive and increase economic viability over the long term. Ottawa is well positioned to advance opportunities in this area, given the prevalence of the city's technology-based industries and post-secondary institutions. A significant action in the strategy under this priority focuses on leveraging Ottawa's L5 site, the autonomous vehicle test site on the Greenbelt Research Farm, to develop a nationally significant smart farm to support and demonstrate innovations in agriculture through industry-led collaboration. Another action is to look to new ways to strengthen marketing efforts focused on buy local and farm-to-table initiatives. The last and final priority speaks to advocating for rural priorities. Here, for an example, an action of the strategy looks to address limitations around access to strategic funding, programs offered by other levels of government for innovation, youth employment, that while available to surrounding municipalities are not available to rural Ottawa, making this a somewhat uneven playing field. Beyond the immediate actions I spoke to, there are short and longer term actions to the strategy that are also important to highlight. For example, there are several municipalities that have implemented innovative rural CIP programs that advance everything from vibrant main streets, agribusiness opportunities, and on-farm diversified uses. Moving forward, the strategy proposes investigating the use of these types of CIPs to see if there would be applicability to the City of Ottawa. Lastly, the strategy recommends developing planning policies that enable rural economic development, such as expanding the definition of home-based businesses, providing for more diverse housing options, providing consideration to new tourism development opportunities, and ensuring that on-farm diversified uses and value-added production include the use of off-site materials to support increased production of a broad range of goods, as well as supporting uses such as wineries, breweries, event space, and restaurants. There, as was mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, align with the official plan's preliminary policy directions. I'll pass this back to Jeffy now to conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. This year, we will work with our partners to implement the immediate actions. As stated in the staff report, these actions will be $1,000 for external requirements. Future actions that require additional funding will be brought forward through the budget approval process. An annual update on the strategy implementation progress will be reported as part of. This brings us to the end of the presentation, but before we conclude, I would like to extend our thanks to all the rural stakeholders, including rural councillors, for participating in the strategy's engagement process and providing us with feedback and input during its development. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the whole team. It's not just for today, actually, for all your effort and engaging and visiting the rural area. And I see they didn't take picture of Don with a beer in his hand from one of the visits, but it's really is uplifting to see this. Other than, even with my glasses, I cannot read those numbers. So I need to do something about it. Not about my eyes, about these numbers to be enlarged. We do. I know there's some of our folks need to have some question, but we do have a speaker, two speakers now. Sorry. Okay. Well, one we're familiar with. I think that's Roddy Bolivar. He's the executive director of the Carp Road Corridor. We like to call him as one of our partners because we've been working with Roddy for quite some time. And when Roddy's coming down, Roddy have 5 minutes to address the committee, and also we have the next speaker is Phil Mount. Phil Mount, Just Food, I believe. Where's Phil? I don't see Phil here. Okay. Oh.
Good morning. My name is Wayne French, and I'm a director with the BIA, Carp Road Corridor BIA. We thank you for this opportunity. With me today is Roddy Bolivar, as the chair has pointed out. He's our executive director. The Carp Road Corridor is located in Ottawa's rural west end, just past the Canadian Tire Centre, and is the largest concentration of employment in rural Ottawa. If this new and landmark economic development strategy is to be considered successful, it has to be successful in our corridor. The strategy helps bring some, though perhaps not enough, attention that employment and economic development in Ottawa's very large rural area is much more than tourism and agriculture. Our light industry and manufacturing area is home to over 4,000 employees and over 300 mostly semi-scale businesses, and in some ways the corridor is one of Ottawa's largest villages. We are here today to support the effort to date and thank you for involving the Carp Road Corridor BIA through one meetings, one-on-one, and being very responsive to our information requests and input. I'll now turn the mic over to our Executive Director, Roddy Bolivar.
Thanks, Wayne, and thank you. I'd like to reiterate Wayne's thanks in particular to Jeffy, very, very responsive, and also to Lauren and her team. The project went really well for us. We've reviewed the actions listed in the plan. There's lots of actions in there. I'd like to bring attention to some of the ones that we see us jumping in and helping you implement. And also the immediate actions. I'm just going to comment on those. 1.1 and 1.2 speaks to development and dissemination of business information. We get requests from our members every day on information and help, and we'd very much like to participate in coming up with the information that businesses need. And then once the toolkit's prepared, we'll be ready and willing to get that out to our many members. Immediate action number 1.5.1 speaks to understanding best practices. And we have a particular interest in this economic interaction between rural and urban and how best practice can be brought to that. And Lauren mentioned that in her talk. Most of our members, we like to differentiate between rural businesses and businesses in rural Ottawa. I think we have many businesses that you might call rural businesses, but really most of our businesses are businesses located in rural Ottawa, and most of those businesses do a good chunk of their business with urban Ottawa, in urban Ottawa, our trades, contractors, that kind of thing. So that interaction between businesses located in rural Ottawa and the market inside urban Ottawa is very important to us. And so I think, as Lauren mentioned, there's an opportunity for Ottawa to become a leader in understanding that interaction and how to leverage municipal tools to promote that interaction. Certainly an important one is transportation efficiency, for instance. Immediate action 4.3.2 is listed under the agriculture section and speaks to the edge conflicts between agriculture and development. And we have those same conflicts with our manufacturing and light industry, and I'd like to propose that as the city moves forward to look at those edge conflicts, they don't just look at agriculture, they look at the light industry, manufacturing. We don't really have dirty businesses in Ottawa. We don't really have smokestacks, but there have been issues in the corridor about how close the urban boundary is coming and those things. So we'd like to encourage those to be included in that edge discussion. Immediate action 4.4.2, again under agriculture, speaks to promoting the agri-food sector and also the issue of distribution. And our area is already a hub of food and distribution with companies like ITEL Foods and other logistics organizations in our area. So we feel Canada Bread's another big one. Our members have some expertise in understanding the food sector, not necessarily agri, but the food sector and the distribution challenges. And the other thing we do have is a large land mass. We regret we didn't get Amazon as a logistics center, but we have land mass that can serve, and certainly for food, our location close to the rural environment, I think we could help that. Some of you may know that there's a business in the village of Carp now that is milling grain again and is a booming business. And so we're seeing that sector, including the processing and distribution, evolving in the corridor. Many of the action items to be implemented in the future are also of great importance to us. One in particular, and listed not short-term, not medium-term, but long-term, is improving the development approvals process. And economic development area, we're not a retail area. Economic development area is new land to build on, and it's new buildings. And what our members would tell you, if some of them were here, is one of the best things the city can do for economic development is make the development approval process work. And you'll know that the provincial policy statement came out just last week, and there's new wording. The wording, I've got it written here somewhere, is that the scale of the review and approval process should be appropriate to the development. And I'd like to think that businesses coming forward in the corridor proposing development that is in accordance with the zoning in Ottawa's largest employment area, rural employment area, should be able to move efficiently.
So, Roddy, we would like you to wrap up because we give you extra minute because Wayne step in on your time. So if you can wrap up, it would be great.
Sure. My final point is we would like to propose that the city establish an implementation committee which includes a handful of business owners. I think all of you and the team has met a number of business owners in rural Ottawa, not just the corridor, who would have ideas and insight. And since as Lauren said, there's a lot of priorities there. We'd be very happy, and some of our members would be happy, if an implementation committee was formed, and we continue to be involved as the project moves forward. Thanks very much.
I'm sure we have some questions for you, so any of my colleagues would like to start, or Councillor Giroux?
I have a comment, but I want to thank you also for your brief presentation, and I know I want to thank Wayne also for being here. I know that it's been a long time we've been seeing this work coming, and it's nice to see it translated right now, specifically in rural businesses and rural economy. and I want to appreciate all the work you and your input through the Carb Corridor BIA and other rural business association that we've been working with. I know that I can recognize Diana Parisi, our Osgood World Business Association, also here, and I know the collaboration and those good conversation that's been happening, it's actually translating, and we're very happy. I want to thank the staff for the hard work you've done, and I did get briefed on the presentation, and I had some feedback in it, but I appreciate all the work you've done, and I want to make sure that these are the kind of presentations and these are the immediate action that we've seen coming out of the report. It's at least we're moving forward through step and through the right direction in rural Ottawa. But I'm really disappointed with our chair that he never mentioned that the snowmobile industry is really big contribution in our rural industry, specifically in restaurants and hotels. So I just want to bring this to mention that. So thank you very much, and I appreciate all the work.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Walworth, well, thank you both, Wayne and Roddy, for all your work on this. And so, Roddy, if you can draw a picture for us. So you're an executive director of Carb Corridor BIA. How many employees you have in that area, in the Carb Road BIA?
Right now, through the city statistics provided to us, about 4,000, and it's been increasing consistently about 4% per year over about the past 10 or 15 years.
And we all know you are in a unique position. You have two entrances from the Fort Erie Highway, and you have a local airport in the middle. And so and in the past, your group talked about making the zoning area conforming, so it's not every applicant need to change the zoning. We've done this with the help of the city, and we saw a good result in this. So if I ask you today, what will be the most challenge, or you hear from your members? Because obviously you guys are active in your community. We work with other rural area, whether Osgood, BIA or other, or Canada North. So what are you hearing in your area? Because yours is different, I would say, than Canada North.
Sure. Thanks for mentioning the zoning, because the BIA formed in 2011. And at formation, many of the members saw extension of municipal water into the business areas as an economic development priority. And we've continued to hear that over the past 8 years. But I can say over the past couple of years, what I've heard more and more at the door, I already mentioned the development approvals process, whether it's become more difficult. Certainly in the corridor, what we're seeing is a lot of the existing severed lots are getting used up, and so there's pressure to expand and develop. There's one subdivision. Unfortunately, it's been in for approvals for 5 years. And so the development approvals, I think, and I mentioned that earlier, and there is an action item to look at that, but it's in the long term. The other, so certainly, as I said, our evidence of economic development in our area is lot creation and new buildings, and we see those new buildings. Many of them are under 600 square meters because of fire code. That brings up our municipal water. What I often, and they're kind of small buildings, and what I often say, we're Ottawa's largest rural employment area, yet because of approvals, we heard about financing earlier also, we don't seem to be able to attract the largest businesses. But I think with the logistics sector, that's going to change. We have lots of opportunity, but even a little bit bigger than just a mom and pop operation. We have lots of people coming. They look at property. They hear they're 4 to 5 years away from opening their doors. They go somewhere else. And I think the second one that's really been hammering home for the past couple of years, some of the things Lauren said affect this, but it's finding employees. And then that's sector-wide. That's across all sectors. And unfortunately, some perspective on across all sectors, the available employees tend to be attracted to attractive jobs, high-paying jobs. And so if there is an employment deficit, the light industry and trades is feeling it a little bit more possibly than the tech sector. You know, there's lots of kids that want to go into tech. I often say to my Canada North friends, if they can find the 30,000 people they say they need, they're actually going to have to loan them to us first. and we'll put them in trades jobs to build the new buildings they're going to need, and also build the homes those 30,000 employees are going to need to live in. And so I see a little bit in this economic development strategy, not necessarily in the actions, but in the background and challenges about affordable housing, about finding employees, about getting employees to work, that I think it didn't quite make it into specific action plans, but as we move forward and talk about challenges, there's text in the background that we can bring forward and say, hey, we need actions working on those. So those are the two, the development approvals and the employee attraction.
I want to agree, but I have to disagree, because some of the approval, it doesn't take 4 or 5 years, and some of it does take, but depend on the challenge and sometimes depend on the applicant or the application. We move quite a bit since we reform our zoning for the car corridor. We move quite a bit. When I took Steve Willis to show him the car corridor, he said, I don't know what you're talking about. Look at how many buildings. So every time he showed up, there was a new building built. So, yeah, I have to disagree with you. Yeah, you talk about, if it's straightforward, it's not going to take 4 or 5 years to get approval, and we've seen that. But if something is challenging or some modification or some changes, and I have to agree with, I work with our staff for quite some time to get the Lee Valley tool to move to our area, and their biggest challenge is the fire storage. It's over $200,000 just to have a fire storage, and now they're one of the folks saying to us, well, if you bring a water, so what we'll do with that storage. So I know it's a catch-22, and we're trying to be objective and work with what we have available to us. And our general manager, actually, politically, he's acting on your behalf, on behalf of the city in Queen's Park, trying to talk to them a little bit, taking away the communal system we talk about. They talk about affordable housing or more housing, and the only way you're going to be able to do affordable housing is going to be in a rural area when the land is still, relatively affordable, but without the communal system, it's not going to be affordable. So anyway, we're working on those, but we have quite a bit to be cheering about. Like we have the Diefenbunker, who receive 80,000 people a year. Now, how could we benefit from those people come to the bunker? And that's what we need to put our think tank on. So, you have that many people, but they don't go to the village, buy ice cream cone. How could you make that happen? And that's what I was hoping the business community can offer, something other than just visit, like Vermont, visit us but leave. Like, no, visit us but stay with us and enjoy dinner or something. So I think that's what we need. And also, we like to continue working with the other folks, like whether OSCID or other area, OSCID BAA, because we need to form that rural, what we need and how could we make it happen better. And I'll ask staff after, but I just want staff to think about, when we read this, we have so many wish or target or if you want to put it, or maybe Lauren can answer that after, but how could we modify? Because if you have 100 priority, really, it's not a priority. So out of the 100, we have to chip on, say, no, 5 is first or 10 is first, and the other 90 is. So I'll let you think about this after, because we do have another presentation. And if there's no other question for Roddy, thank you very much, both Mr. French and Roddy, for your presentation. And now we'll ask Phil Mount to Just Foods. Phil? Good morning, Phil. You do have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair and Councillors. My name is Phil Mount, and I'm speaking as Associate Director at Just Food. We wish to enthusiastically support Council and staff's Rural Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan and your commitment to economic opportunity that our rural area represents to this city. Just Food is focused on economic development within the region's food and farming sectors since 2003, and we strongly believe that this opportunity has long been overlooked as a serious economic driver that it is and can be. We agree with enhancing the Rural Affairs Partnership Program grant to support local leadership on rural issues, events, and initiatives. Just Food accessed this funding in 2017 as part of Canada's 150 legacy to ensure rural connections were available to all of Ottawa's residents, including funding tours of new Canadians to local farms. However, we know that this grant program, through this new strategic priority, can do more. Just Food's Startup Farm and New Roots programs have made viable entry points for new Canadians with both agrarian experience and interest to start new businesses here in their new home of Ottawa. The Rural Affairs Partnership Program should support expansion and duplication of programs like this. As well, the strategy identifies a need for flexible policies to support small-scale and innovative agricultural operations. We're asking ARAC to take the lead in applying this lens throughout all departments and throughout the official plan. ARAC is the champion to support all types of agriculture, small-scale and large, as well as innovative farm and food processing businesses, ensuring that this is a city that prioritizes all rural assets. We need a strengthened focus, particularly on small farm businesses, to provide much-needed assistance for new farmers and those farmers now looking to find farm succession solutions and want their farms to remain intact. Developers cannot be farmers' only option for succession. That hurts our agricultural communities and, in fact, hurts our city's economic development over the long term. It reduces the land base for the production of fresh local food. Given increased global challenges, retaining this land base for agriculture around our capital city will be of greater importance over this next official plan horizon. In particular, our viable and productive farmland is an asset with a value far exceeding the economic potential within any other city in Canada, and in fact places us in a unique position compared to any capital city worldwide. It's one of the defining features of Ottawa, and we ask that ARAC councillors identify it as a valuable asset to the city and protect our farmland during the March 30 vote on urban expansion. Holding the line on urban and rural village expansion is what directs resources and investment towards the intensification we need in Ottawa to build complete communities in suburban areas and rural villages, thus ensuring that young people and seniors can stay living in rural villages with more affordable housing and work options, meeting the strategy's goals for rural life to have strong appeal for residents. And finally, we've witnessed firsthand the positive effects of supporting rural businesses and entrepreneurs through Savour Ottawa Buy Local Food, an integrated program that's developed since 2006 through steadfast and creative partnership across Just Food, Ottawa Tourism, and the City of Ottawa Rural Affairs and Economic Development, where we have additionally leveraged significant provincial investment. This includes making information available to consumers, for example, through the 2019 new release of the Savour Ottawa app, promoting local food and farming businesses with direct marketing options, but it also includes long-standing work to develop economic supports like business planning, building networks, training, innovative technologies and practices for intensive production, and building an incubator processing kitchen with private sector partnership to ensure businesses have options to locally process food. That's not to downplay the benefits of Savour Ottawa's tourism and promotion roles, which support and provide new options for rural businesses. Savour Ottawa develops, promotes, and leads by local food marketing campaigns, events, and tours targeted to suburban and urban residents and tourists alike. The newest in 2020, working in partnership with the Eastern Ontario Agri-Food Network and all of the counties to the south and east of the city. We've launched an art and farm tour, which will run Labor Day weekend, bringing tourists and tour buses to more than 100 host farms, orchards, and vineyards, each showcasing rural food, art, and craft enterprises throughout each ward in rural Ottawa and across Eastern Ontario.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up, Phil, please.
Just Food is serious about economic development in the rural area, and we look forward to working with rural councillors and staff to build upon this ambitious action plan. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Phil. And on behalf of the committee and my colleague, I want to thank you for for your participation as Just Food. We work with you in the past and your group, and we're very successful with the farmers market, especially with the new one in Lansdowne Park and other area. Any questions for Phil? Well, thank you very much. And now, going to open up the question. Thank you, Phil. And now we're going to open question to staff. Maybe I'll start with Mr. Herwire. I know you've been on tour, you visit some of the area, and you heard both the presenter, and I'm sure that's not the first time you hear from them, but how could we, the priorities we have right now in front of us, how could we take it and say, okay, the first version is 10 priority. We need to work on 10 priority. We heard about broadband challenge. We heard about transportation in the rural areas challenge, small business or home-based businesses. Like, so which one of those you're going to take first to say we can do these? Because we heard some of the changes we made in the past translate to a positive action. And, when we modified the zoning, let's say on corridor, and, we work with the business, with the community, with the BAA, and we come up with a good result. And so far, it's been working for us since. So how could we start taking this plan one piece at a time?
Thank you, Chair. I'll ask Shayla to weigh in after my opening remarks, but certainly we've identified short, medium, long-term priorities in the action plan. We're not going to be able to do them all, but you're right. I think we have to focus on what we could achieve in the short term. Some of them are underway already. We're already initiated a zoning review for the diversified on-farm uses, so some of them have started already. We're certainly happy to engage with the rural business community. As Mr. Bolivar indicated, we're going to need them to partner with us to find solutions. The broadband strategy, for instance, is underway. Angela Scanlon is here if you want to get into detail, but there'll be a presentation, I think, in April, the IT subcommittee. So a lot of these things are moving already. Certainly, you and Councillor Moffat are familiar with the official plan process and, our direction from the council sponsors group and, staff's commitment to protect agricultural land. So we're aligned on many of the comments we've heard already. So Shayla, I don't know if you want to dive into any further detail in terms of priorities.
Sure, absolutely. So, Mr. Chair, I think Don covered most of it, but most of the initial actions are underway, but some of the new stuff we'll be doing this year is around the business support. So that toolkit that Roddy spoke to, those workshops and that kind of work that isn't underway yet, but that we plan to do this year.
And I'd like to, I know Mr. Mountain asked, as a rural or agricultural affair committee should protect the agricultural land. What I can assure you, I think it's not a one meeting we have. We don't emphasize to staff our position. And as a committee or as an individual council, we're all committed protecting our agricultural land. So I just had to put that in. But so when we talk about the 15-minute so if you are in a village of Carp, which is I'm so familiar with, you can go, you can walk to the local restaurant, you can walk to the museum if you wish, or you can go for a walk and then you can go out for dinner. So it's all walkable within the community. Are we focusing more about this? Are we emphasizing, I know we talk about, going to work should take more, but sometimes it's unrealistic because if I have to go anywhere in a rural area, it's going to take you 15 minutes in a car, never mind walking. But so how are we addressing that? Like how are we going to be?
Thank you, Chair. So certainly that's probably the biggest priority in our official plan is to how to make our communities, whether they be villages, our suburban greenfield areas, or our more urban communities, more of that 15-minute neighborhood where you can walk to, basic services. There will always be some trips outside of those areas, but for a lot of the day-to-day your food, your basic needs, to look at building more complete neighborhoods so that that can be more of an option. It gets people off our already congested roads. We're tying that to transit where we can. Looking at, we will be looking at changing our zoning to provide more opportunities for, a diverse range of uses, improved connectivity in some of our villages. CARP is probably ahead of a number of our villages in that respect, but there's room for improvement across the city in that regard.
Any, so on the action, I'm not sure who's going, so are you, I know you're always working with the rural council, you call us or we'll call you, you're briefing us, but on the action, are you going to have a small committee working together to prioritize what we think should we go first, or how, how could we help? That's what I'm trying to do, because we have organization, whether the CARP BIAs or the CARP Village BIA or the Osgood business or other, they like to help and they have their own input. How could we keep them engaged in the future development as we go through? Because we not just have the rural economic development, you have the OP, it's all connected, and then we have transportation master plan, which is, yesterday I met with staff and they're talking about other option of transportation than just OC transport, because everybody think when we ask for transit, we ask for OC transport, but there's other ways. Rideau Carlton Raceway, they send their own shuttle bus to the park and ride and pick up their staff. That's a creative way. So, we need to talk about this and also promote it a little bit more. So if CARP Corridor, they have 4,000 people working there, instead of having OC Transport coming in during the day when it's nobody needed, they can have their own shuttle from the park and ride. And so who's going to sit with you, are you going to small group of committee, mixed councilors and staff, continue working on this to keep the other folks engaged? How you plan to deal with it? I'm not sure who's going to answer that.
I'll start and I'll ask Shayla to weigh in as well. So obviously there's a lot of consultation ongoing right now in terms of, this strategy, our official plan, our transportation master plan, infrastructure master plan. A lot of pieces underway in terms of, the strategy. We'll be bringing forward our work plan to ARAC in just over a month. So that would be a good opportunity, to ask some of those questions.
Certainly, I think we could, I know Roddy spoke to having businesses included as part of the implementation, and I think that input is important, and it's certainly our intention to continue to consult with businesses as we roll out items like the toolkit and whatnot. So we could definitely, take this away and figure out how we could potentially put together a group that could include some of the businesses from different wards and the councillors, so that we bring you along with the implementation strategy and get your input as we go along.
I would like to answer you. Okay, Councilor Ruiz, you have a question?
No, this is very good point you brought, and I'm hoping that you will engage throughout your workshop that you want to do. I'm hoping that those business associations that have been involved with you, if you're looking at about prioritizing what we're going to do first, like Councilor Shantir is saying, it is very important, because if you look at our rural villages, we have 28 of them. Each one of them has a different characterism and have a different challenges. Not necessarily the CARP corridors problems, it's related to Osgood or to Cumberland, but it's vice versa. But if you look at the bigger, broader picture, most rural challenge issues, it is collectively, it's all in all rural Ottawa. So I think I'm hoping that you reach out to our business association that we've been working with you throughout those workshops, so you can get the proper feedback, not just like surveying or anything like that. So I'm hoping that I will second what my Councillor Shantir is saying, hoping that we can do collectively those conversations, specifically with our BIA and business associations.
There's no other question from our colleague. So item 3 is that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend Council approve the Rural Economic Development Strategy and action plans as outlined in this report and attached in document 1. So on the item, Carrie? And thank you, folks, really appreciate. We come a long way in a little while. Thank you. Continuing our meeting, and notice of motion for consideration of subsequent meeting. Say none. Inquiries? None. Other business we dealt with earlier, and adjournment. Thank you. Thank you very much, folks.